Everyone in this House voted for the Pause Act. And for animal welfare is very important. Don't think you're going to find anyone sitting here who wants animals to be abused. I think we can be fairly safe in that. But, and I hesitate with this. It's not I'm not taking this lightly. There's a difference between a pet and livestock. Now, livestock, and there's no successful farmer who mistreats their livestock. It doesn't work like that, because you do not, if they're not healthy and happy, they're not flourishing, and it's not worth getting up in the morning if they're not healthy and happy. That's just. But the Pause Act, and it's a case I'm going to talk about. The livestock organizations are all in favor. Again, because farmers do not want to have animals abused. But the Pause Act, the Pause inspectors have the ability to change people's lives as well. Now, the parliamentary assistant, she alluded to it. I'm not sure she was talking about the same issue, but so who pays when an animal is deemed that there's an issue and the inspector says that animal has to be removed? Who pays for the care and control of that animal? Right? That should be the liability of the owner. But there has been a case where the animals were completely healthy, but the inspector deemed, it was a beef herd, the inspector deemed that there was too much debris in the yard. The animals are completely healthy. They were removed and placed under supervision, and the bill was sent to the farmer. The bill was $400 and some thousand. The farmer, it would have been much better if they had just said, sell them. They were healthy, sell them. The farmer took it to the tribunal and he won. The bill was reduced to $14,000, which is much more, for lack of a better word, sane in commercial. The government's appealing it. Now, I can't talk about the appeal, neither can the government, that's their line. But in that case, if this happens, then the Pause Act destroyed that farm. And the animals were healthy. There's no argument about the health of the animals. Now, agricultural organizations are concerned. Farmers are concerned. I've talked to a few farmers, talked to a few organizations who didn't know there was changes to the Pause Act coming. They would have liked to know. Because, and hopefully, when this bill goes to committee, and hopefully they will accept some amendments or government proposes amendments themselves. Because that is a flaw in the Pause Act. No one should have the right to abuse an animal. No one. But when the animals are healthy, then we also have to look at common sense. So common sense would dictate that, okay, so perhaps the owner isn't capable of taking care of these animals. Perhaps, you know, there's some way to help the owner sell the animals as opposed to boarding them and having a bill for far more than the animals are ever worth. That's an issue. Now, it might only be one issue, but it's an issue. And I'd just like to read into the record. If I can just bear with me, Speaker, it's legal now to use yeah, it's illegal now. Okay, but I can use it now. So, and this news flash is the first time I've ever done this. So, and this is a news article. Tribunal judgment saves farmer from almost $400,000 bill after beef animals removed for no reason. And this, the 77-year-old farmer must pay only $14,276 of the $391,196 sought by Provincial Animal Welfare Services when its officers seized his healthy beef herd before Christmas and held them at an expensive foster farm for months. But another paragraph, and again, this is a news article, so I wasn't there, I'm just going by what the news. Paws rounded up and removed 101 of Angus cross beef cattle December 16th after you failed to comply with orders to clean up hazardous debris on parts of the 200-acre property where the animals roamed. 2 animals were injured badly enough to be put down during the chaotic roundup involving the use of ATVs, and a contractor ended up in Toronto Hospital with serious injuries. That wasn't the farmer who did that. That was Paws. So I think now that we're looking at Paws, we need to look at how Paws actually interacts. And I take the parliamentary assistant at her word. You know what? When you create something, nothing's perfect. You need to look at how to make it better. We all want to protect. We all have our favorite animals. The Solicitor General's got a rabbit. I have a dog. Yeah, you know. But Hal the rabbit. I listen intently. But like despite our differences, this is a pretty great place if we actually listen to each other. So, but the difference how to deal with an individual animal or how to deal with a herd, and the animals were healthy. They weren't healthy after the roundup, and neither were some of the people involved in the roundup. And I think we need to look, but again, the government is, from what I understand, is appealing that. And perhaps that's one of the in the Paws Act, perhaps that's one of the amendments. But we need to look at the cause. We always need to look at the cause. But I don't want to leave the impression, and I've repeated several times, and I don't want to leave the impression that anyone in the official opposition or anyone in the agricultural community is okay with the abuse of animals at no time. And we have no problem with if it's identified that you have to act. And you have to act quickly, you have to, but there's and speaking of quickly, if and better minds than mine might know this better, but if you are charged under the PAWS Act, you have 5 days to appeal. For a farmer who could be very good at his job, and it might not be, it's an allegation, or 5 days, 5 days in May is different than 5 days in November, because agriculture is very seasonal. And it also, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone, and I don't know any PAWS inspectors, and I'm sure that they're good at their job, but it's so varied. So when it used to be under the SPCA, I don't know if I've told the story before in the Ledge, but I'm going to tell it.
I remember the yak story.
Yeah, that was when I was first here. The yak was an endangered species. He still is. But so we had a dairy farm, and my wife had a little store across the road, and we had a horse across from the store. It looked kind of cute because people, when it came to the store, look at it. And the SPCA inspector at the time came to my wife's store. She was a regular customer. Very nice person. But one day she came, and let's make this really clear, it's the wife's horse. I don't like horses, okay? And they don't like me. Horses are pretty good judges of character, I think. but anyway. No, I said that. I tell it like it is. They don't like me either.
Listen intently.
So, yeah, listen. I don't leave much to be hidden. The horse was lying sprawled out in the field. That's how horses sleep sometimes. And the inspector looked at the end of my wife's, and she, oh my God, like that horse is dead, like that farmer doesn't know what he's, and she got really upset. And then Rhea went, Velvet, and she went like this, and the horse got up and came to her.
It wasn't dead.
It wasn't dead. It looked dead to that inspector. They're okay, I shouldn't say this. Honestly, it wouldn't have bothered me. But
We heard that.
I didn't love the horse. I love my wife. I didn't love my wife's horse. But I have no affinity for horses, okay?
Cows. It's cows.
I like cows, but
Cows like you.
Keep going.
oh man. You know, if you guys keep it up, I'm gonna have to go back to using notes, and that's pretty brutal. Yeah. Okay. But that inspector was probably very well trained at many things, but she didn't recognize that. And I often think about that. Because a PAWS inspector has a lot of power. And if a PAWS inspector doesn't know something, then, you know, that 5 days might not be enough. And there's very few other appeal processes that you only have 5 days. Now, I understand, I'm guessing why that 5 days is there is if the animal is in crisis or near crisis, you don't want to give a 30-day period. I understand that. But there's all kinds of issues where it was like another one, anecdotally, the water bowl, the inspector didn't know how to work the water bowl. So the animal didn't have access to water. Now, that's not as silly as it sounds, because some of that stuff is very complicated. But not if you've never, right? Like, I can't use a cash machine, right? Like, but when a person of power and who needs to have that power. We're not disputing that that person doesn't need to have that ability, right? But there needs to be some kind of appeal process, and it needs to be reasonable. And so I think that's something that has to be looked at. If the government now, they're opening up the PAWS Act, which every piece of legislation should be able to open it up and make it better. So if we're going to open up the PAWS Act, let's make it better. And let's protect animals, but let's make sure it actually works on the farm. The livestock organizations all signed on. Many of them have their own internal processes, their own inspection systems, because they want to make sure that when they sell a product I know a lot about dairy, when they ensure that the milk that you buy is produced by healthy animals that are housed in well-maintained facilities, that that they have access to everything they need. Dairy Farmers Ontario ensures that. But Dairy Farmers Ontario also signed on to PAWS to make sure that if there's any question, that a third party can go in and say, no, okay. But that third party, it has to be appealable. Reasonably appealable. Now we're gonna go back.
If we see cows outside in the winter, are they safe?
Cows outside in the winter?
Yeah, like when it's really cold.
Cows outside. There's actually been complaints about that. So some type of cattle are better in the winter. Thank you for that heckle, very friendly heckle, because it gives me a. So cattle have very weak respiratory systems. So the biggest problem with housing cattle is actually, one of the biggest problems is pneumonia. And that's why if you look at barns where cattle are housed inside, they've got very intricate systems of ventilation, and that's because, and cattle, especially dairy cattle, work hard. So they work, right? Like producing milk is hard, and they have, but cows outside, so beef cows who have thicker coats and who are used to it, it's actually as healthy or healthier outside. As long as they eat more, it takes more energy to be outside. They need it's better if they have protection, right? If you have protection from the wind and you have, it's a lot like us if you're ice fishing in a tent or if you're ice fishing. No, a lot of it, no. But there's nothing wrong with if you're doing it correctly to have cows outside.
Even when it's very cold?
Yes. Yeah, so on our farm, we had dairy cows inside and beef cows outside. And the beef cows have a windbreak, and the dairy cows were inside. But the dairy cows, if the temperature, sometimes temperature changes really drastically, and then my ventilation system wasn't as high-tech as some, and if the temperature changed really drastically, let's say -5 to +15 overnight. That hardly ever happens, but sometimes you get a, and you would have problems with pneumonia with the dairy cows inside.
Oh, yeah.
But you'd never have a problem outside.